Hello, this is Rachel with the Prattville Public Library, and today I'm going to show you how to make candles by hand. So first things first, we're going to get all our supplies ready. I've got gloves because candle fragrances can be skin irritants. I've got my small saucepan about halfway full of water, and I've got it over medium heat, getting that water nice and hot so that we can do sort of a double boiler technique. I've got a little aluminum cupcake tin, and I have kind of pinched one side of it to make it so that it'll pour like a spout when we have the melted wax in it. I have wax pellets. I've got a baby food jar, which will be our container for our candle today, a wax wick, a little wick holder, and a glue dot to secure the wick holder, and wax wick all to the baby food jar. I also have these are some supplies I used before. This is a pencil sharpener, and I used this with some crayons to create this little container, which has shredded up crayon bits and to color the wax. And the fragrance, I went ahead and just put that in there as well, so we can dump that into our melted wax later on. I've got a craft stick for stirring. I have about a cup and a half of wax here, but once it melts, it decreases in volume significantly. So we're just going to add a little bit at a time to figure it out. Also, I recommend if you're doing this double boiler method and you don't have an actual container with a handle for candle making, you bring some metal tongs. Probably 2 pair is the best way to go, and then also have some oven mitts handy so that you can keep your hands safe from the heat. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm actually going to take my gloves off for just a moment since we're not working with the wax and fragrance just yet. I'm going to take those off and grab my baby food jar and grab my wick and wick holder. I'm going to thread the wick through into the wick holder, and you got to kind of push it because the wick is a little bit thickly waxed, but that's good. That'll help with the quality of the burn of the candle. And then when I've got about 1 centimeter or 2 left here, this is going to be the main part of the wick. This little bit that's left on the flat side of the wick holder, I'm just going to fold down, and I'm going to put a glue dot right over it. So here's my glue dot specifically made for candles. I'm going to take the clear backing, the paper backing off, stick this right here. So we attached our glue dot to the end of the wick holder and over the little end piece of the wick. And then I'm going to remove the plastic backing as well. Kind of slowly peel that off. There we go. And we're going to place this sticky bit right in the center of our baby food jar, like this. I like to kind of sandwich it between 2 fingers like this and smush it right in the middle, or as close to the middle as you can get. It's not a big deal if it's not exactly centered, but that's pretty good. Now, if you have a clothespin, you can absolutely use a clothespin to kind of set your wick so that it stays upright and in the center of your candle. I do not have one, but I do think I have an extra craft stick, so I might just set one to the side here to kind of help prop up the wick. So I actually found a clothespin, and I'm going to go ahead and use that to secure, just kind of set it up top at the rim of the baby food jar, and that holds the wick nice and upright and straight that way. So I'm going to set our prepared jar aside. Our water's beginning to steam, which is good. It's warmed up a little bit. So I'm going to take my little aluminum cupcake tin, and I'm going to pour about 2 tablespoons of this wax into it. Maybe a little bit less. I want to do just very small amounts at a time. And the reason I'm doing that is to let the heat conduct through well, so that it melts evenly. And I'm just using my tongs to submerge the container just a little bit in that hot water. And I'm going to use my craft stick for stirring. So I'm just stirring as I go. The pellets are already starting to melt, which is great. That's exactly what we want. And when they're all the way melted, I'll add a little bit more, a tablespoon or 2 more. So we're doing kind of like a super cheap, super easy double boiler system here that won't mess up any of our dishes for eating. That's kind of the idea behind using the disposable cupcake tins. So I'm going to stir for a minute and then maybe let it sit for a minute, submerged. It's a little tricky to do two-handed. If you have an extra set of hands here, that's helpful. And with the submersion, you want to make sure that just the very bottom layer of the tin is submerged. You don't want to get any water in the wax mixture. So be sure you're keeping a reasonable amount of distance between the rim of the cupcake liner and the edge of the water that's kind of displacing up to try and knead it. Cool, so it's melting down. Now these little white wax pellets will melt clear, so you will know when you are completely good to go because you'll just have some clear liquid in the bottom of your tin. It happens fairly quickly. A little bit of stirring can help it along. If the steam from the water gets to be too much on your hand, you can use a oven mitt with a little glove shape to help out. But since I've just got it on medium right now, the steam is not very intense and I'm able to just kind of hang out. Okay, so that's mostly melted. I've just got a few itty bitty white flecks in there. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more of this base wax, as we're calling it, this white wax, or it turns out clear when you melt it. So I'm going to add just a little bit more. You can remove it from the heat while you're doing this if you'd like, but try not to keep it off the heat for too long because it solidifies fairly quickly. So I added about 2 tablespoons more of wax there, partially because I was not very good at controlling how much came out of the bag. But I think this is going to add up to about 4 tablespoons of that wax. We will go ahead and mix in our mix-ins, our fragrance and our color after all of this is completely melted. Now we do want it to be completely melted just so that the pigmentation and the scent is evenly distributed through the candle. Since it's a little candle, just a little baby food jar candle, it's not a big huge deal if the scent and the color and whatnot aren't evenly distributed. But for bigger candles, or if you do a candle in a mold, it will be a bigger deal and you'll want to make sure you get your consistency right and all that jazz. I'm going to let this sit for a second. If you do use crayon sharpened bits to color your candle, that's a really cheap and economic way to color them. But I do recommend that you make sure that all of the paper is off the crayon before you start sharpening it or shredding it, because if there's a little bit of paper left, that can increase the fire risk. Of course, there's always a risk of fire with candles, so please do be mindful. Always leave your candles where you can see them and make sure not to leave them unattended while they are burning. Okay, so my wax is melted, it's clear, it's liquidy. I'm going to remove this from the heat super quick just so my hand can uncramp. And I'm going to very quickly stir in my color and scent mixture. And I'm going to use my little stir stick to help scoop out the contents of my little container as well. And if I notice it starts to solidify before I'm able to get it all incorporated, I'll just stick it back over the heat for a couple seconds. So for now, see that little lumpy bit? We want to get that out. And just stir and stir and stir. And it's beginning to solidify along the edges here. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back over the heat for a couple seconds while I finish stirring. Grab my tongs, stick it in the heat, and stir, 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 stir. There we go. Now that depth of color starts really coming out. Distributing itself nicely. The wax gets back down to a nice liquidy consistency. And we are good to go. So I'm going to pull this out carefully with my tongs. So here's the candle mold. And very carefully over some wax paper is recommended or something like that. I'm just going to do it over the cooktop here and clean later as needed. But if you have some wax paper laid down, that's typically a pretty good idea. We're going to pour using that spout and fill up our little candle. Now, if you can notice, it's only about a third of the way full. So I'm just going to repeat this process a couple more times. You can mix and match your scents. You can do mix and matched colors as well. Really, the sky's the limit in terms of what you want to do to create your candle. This particular one that I'm making is patchouli scented, which is a nice kind of woodsy, earthy scent, kind of like incense. There's lots of incenses that are patchouli scented. And I think I'm going to do a blue and white candle for this one and just fill it up the rest of the way with regular wax. So it's kind of got a two-toned cool look going on. So while that layer is setting over there, I'm going to start melting my next batch of wax. So what it's looking like with how much the wax is melted down and diminished in volume, it's looking like we're going to want to use about 4 tablespoons, and it filled it a third of the way up, so that's about 12 tablespoons total to really top off your whole baby food jar worth of wax for the candle. Let me add a little bit more here. Sprinkle this in. There we go. Yeah, so that's the gist of it. Basically, it's melting, pouring, adding in whatever embellishments you want. I do have some biodegradable glitter at home that is great for decorating candles. It can add a cool glitzy effect. I forgot to bring that in. It's not recommended that you use plastic glitter because, again, that could melt and smell funky or create an additional fire hazard. So yeah, what I'm thinking is these 12 tablespoons of wax pellets are gonna just about finish off my little baggie of wax that I said had about a cup and a half or so. That will most likely be just about the perfect amount for this activity, which is nice. And again, I'm on medium heat, just a nice simmer with the water. And I'm melting the pellets all the way down to where all of it is liquid and all of it is clear. You can switch hands whenever you need to. Be sure you do not let go of the cupcake tin, because then you'll get wax in your water and on your pan, and it will not be good. Especially if you have the fragrances and colors in there, I would not recommend cooking with that pan if you spill wax in it. That's another reason why we're using these disposable containers. Okay, so I've got that melted down. Let's pour it in. There we go, got another third about. A little bit more than that now. So I bet this last bit will just top it off perfectly. Let's see, I'm gonna refill to the side here so that your hands don't mess things up. Brilliant. And you can kind of alternate between stirring and just shifting it around and letting it sit in the heat and melt without stirring. Really, all three of those techniques work together to create the fastest melting process. But there's a little bit of patience involved too, because you don't want to overheat your wax. You can get clumps that way, inconsistent texture. And of course, you want to always be careful with working with heat anyway so that you don't get injured or burnt. So take a little turn with stirring, break up some of those bigger chunks. It's almost melted. There we go. And I'm just going to set it on the hot pad one more time to allow myself to reposition my hand with my tongs so I can pour more efficiently, less messily, and to shake out the last little bits of wax there. And there we go. So this candle right here is more or less completed. We do need to let it set. So here's the candle. We do need to let it set so that it fully dries and hardens. And that usually takes about 12 hours. So I like to let mine sit overnight. And then you'll just trim the wick. You want to have about a third, a quarter of an inch of a wick. If it's too long, again, fire hazard, we're good to go. You've got a handmade, beautifully scented, super cute little pastel candle. So I hope you guys enjoy. I would love to see if you guys make your own candles, what they look like, how they turn out. And thank you so much for watching. On behalf of the Utah Prattville Public Library, I hope you have a great day.